Hello lovely people, in this video we will be measuring this thing. So if you followed me a few videos ago, I did receive a Joying head unit that has digital outputs, and in this video I'm going to be measuring it. So what I'm going to be measure is very similar to the one that I did with a Toto. I will be measuring the amplifier outputs on these. I'm going to be measuring the RCAs. We're going to check the voltage and how clean they are, and then we're going to measure the digital output, which is the optical, which is here, and the coax that is here. I did open it up just to show you, because when I did like the initial review, I did said that it's a 2D unit, but it feels that it's very empty inside. And I just wanted to show you why it is so empty. So you have this ribbon cable that goes into the screen. Here at the bottom, you have this heatsink that cools probably the CPU and everything, all the Android stuff that's in there. But the main thing that we have a look is right there. So here you can see this is the actual amplifier, and it does look to be a TDA chip. I do believe Joying has on their website the actual model that's in there, but as long as we know that it's probably kind of similar, maybe not exactly the same, but very similar chip that we had in the Atoto unit, and the same chip that we have in vast majority of the head units. So we do expect the performance to be exactly the same on all of them. Now, one thing to know that this cap is much bigger than we have in the Atoto unit, so potentially you have some wiggly. So potentially you could have some extra power delivered for transients or whatever, but it is a built-in amplifier anyway. But it's pretty much it. One thing is good, that since it has a lot of space, on the top panel you can actually put probably a 12 centimeter fan that could potentially run very low RPMs, and it would cool this heatsink, because as we know, under the dash in summer conditions, it's very hot for head units and everything else, especially if you're going to be using that built-in amplifier. It will get hot, so cooling is not gonna hurt. We have a few connectors on the board, which I'm not sure was it for, but again, testing, measuring, and we're gonna show you the results. Very quickly, just want to show you my setup for measuring and everything. It's my kitchen laboratory. So this is my lithium battery, which I have in there. I have 13.2 volts. The head unit is running. When I tested the amplifier, I connected one of these, whichever is for the amplifier, into the load bank, because I have a load bank, and then RCAs directly into the Focusrite. I didn't measure with the Focusrite today because it's just easier and I have it on hand and everything is fine. And for the digital, so how did I measure digital signal? The digital signal, which in this case it could be either optical or coax. So it goes into the DAC, like the DAC inputs, and then I'm measuring outputs of the DAC analog into the Focusrite. So as long as everything is measuring as Focusrite, I know that the head unit via digital signal doesn't add anything, no distortion, no nothing. But if the distortion is higher than the actual from the Focusrite, that means that this head unit adds even through the digital, and I have all the measurements there, so I'm going to show you everything. In the settings, I'm just going to show you very quickly. I made sure that, if I can find them, yeah, so this is 4-channel for the amplifier. If you put 2 channels, the rears don't work from the amplification, so I cannot test all 4 channels of the amplifier. So this has to be on 4, then EQ, everything is flat. Balance flat, scenes is just nothing, so I just disabled as much stuff as possible. Everything 0 bass boost 0, gains same as it was, no crossovers for any of the drivers. Everything is basically left as flat as possible. And one thing that I had to do, because I didn't get enough output via USB. So I put files and I played the inbuilt player. So I was playing all the files, like you can see here, like my white noise and my sine tone and all that kind of stuff. So I was playing through this built-in player and I didn't get enough output. So what I had to do, I had to go to settings, system, so factory 8888, okay. And here in the factory, oh my God, I had to go these ones, sound balance. So if I click on sound balance, the music app, I had to increase it. It was by default on 10 and I didn't get enough output. I got only 3 volts output on RCAs when I was testing this. And on analog, I noticed that it's 5 volts. So I needed more output. So I put this on 14. And even now you see, so this is on the digital. So if I click to 10, 1.1 volt, 14, 1.8 volts. So basically, yeah, the music, if you're playing through the app, the built-in app, it has to be on 14. And with the settings, pretty much it. So yeah, let's jump into the laptop and let's have a look at the measurements. Just a heads up, with all of these measurements, I'm not gonna go in such a high detail as I did last time. If you want to learn more about this, watch the previous video that I did about the Atoto head unit. That one has a bit more detail, just explaining to you more what is what. I did quite a few different measurements using different inputs and different outputs. So first of all, analog input and USB input. USB is basically files on the stick that are played via the internal player. And then I tested the amplifier output, RCA output, and digital output. So we're going to start with the simplest one, which is the THD versus level of the amplifier, the built-in amplifier. And from this we can see that it's clean all the way up to 13 watts, not volts, watts, and 1% THD we have about 16 watts. So this is exactly the same like we had with the Atoto unit. So we can definitely say that the chip is kind of the same. However, the Atoto unit was slightly cleaner. That was, I think, below 0.5%. This one is 0.06. So the Atoto was slightly cleaner on the amplifier, but the difference is so small that there's not going to be like any difference between them. Now the beauty is in the RCAs. So the RCAs are much cleaner than the amplifiers. They do go down to 0.018, and this is the level of quite not bad amplifiers. So like in my testing, everything below 0.1 is super nice. Everything like in between this is good. So this for RCAs, that's the thing, I have no idea how the head units are. Like, are they that clean or the other ones are much cleaner than that? Because I didn't test many head units and this is the first RCA that I measured. According to like DSP standards, this would be quite poor, but it is a head unit after all. So for RCAs it's fine, because most amplifiers, like good amplifiers, not very good, but like normal amplifiers, are like somewhere like in this range, about 0.2, 0.05, something in this. So it'll be a very good match for good amplifiers. Now the surprising part is the voltage. So let me just switch to voltage because it was on watts. I did manage to get 5 volts out of these RCAs. Now in the spec sheet, I believe it's claimed that it has 4 volts out, and I did had to, as I mentioned, had to crank up the signal level inside the actual head unit, and I got 5 volts super clean, like up to 1%. We have 6 volts, which is very surprising for an Android head unit, which is like very cool. To have 5 volts, more than 4 volts clean, it's very nice. Like the Helix DSP dot 2 that I was testing, that one had something similar. So it's very nice to see. Not DSP clean, but very clean RCAs and very good voltage. Now let's have a look at THD versus level. This is the amplifier. THD versus frequency. So this is the amplifier, and you can see everything is flat. Something 0.06, everything is flat.
no big difference in regards to the frequencies. On RCAs, there's a slightly different picture. On RCAs, we can see that, like in the mid-range, somewhere between like 100 and 1K, it does go down 0.013, so it does go much lower. However, we have this slight rise at the top end, which rises up to 0.03, which is nothing, and it rises a little bit at the bottom end, 0.15. But again, for lower frequencies, it doesn't matter, and for higher, probably you're not going to hear that at all. Now, one thing to note on RCA is that the noise, you can see it's constant, and what is rising is the actual THD. So, yeah, it is what it is. Now, I couldn't do any of these like THD sweeps on any other like inputs. I cannot do it on digital because it has to go through the USB player. So with all the other stuff, I just played different files. So for example, 1 kilohertz. So let's have a look at this one. 1 kilohertz file. So this one is an analog in and amplifier out. So obviously it's not as clean, it's not as nice. Let me just do 2020. Yeah, something like this. The noise is a bit higher because usually for amplifiers you have something about minus 120. So it is a bit higher, quite high harmonics, all the way up to minus 66. Potentially audible, and we have 0.065. So this is amplifier outputs. Now the same analog input but RCA's out, we have slightly lower noise and we have slightly lower harmonics, and THD is 0.018, which is much lower. Cool. Now when you switch to the USB, so basically play files from inside the head unit, you have something like this. So we have a little bit more noise like here. I don't know where it's coming from. The laptop is disconnected from the grid, so I don't know where this SP coming from, but we have these little spiky thingies. We have no idea why. So this is from the USB, and then digital outputs. With digitals, bam, you can see 120 and no harmonics. So basically this is 0.05. This is measuring the scarlet focus rate. So we can say that anything that you're gonna play through the digital outputs is gonna be as clean as whatever you're gonna connect the digital output to. So if you're going to connect it to the DSP, so it's going to be as clean as the DSP, and it doesn't taint the digital outputs at all. Exactly the same with coax. Coax has slightly less noise, surprisingly, compared to optical, but yeah, very nice to see. So basically, digital outputs are as clean as can be. So this is the main reason why I'm going to put this head unit in my car, and I'm going to be running coax out into my Helix DSP, and it's going to be very clean signal. Now the other thing that I tested is Bluetooth. So Bluetooth I tested over the phone. I didn't connect it with a Android Auto or anything, just literally Bluetooth connection and Bluetooth play music, just for test. I did test the codec was ACC, so it's the lowest codec possible. However, it's not that bad. So THD 0.04. And we see these, but these are not harmonics. This is I want to say like Bluetooth noise, because harmonics you have increments, so 1K, 2K, 3K, 4K, and this is what, 4.5K? No idea what that is. 6.5K. These are very weird harmonics, so I don't know why they are there, but it's clean. This Bluetooth is much cleaner than a Toto, and I want to say it's even usable. It's actually usable Bluetooth. So now we're going to have a look at intermodulation distortion. This is intermodulation of 60 Hz and 7K, the typical that we usually do. And we see that on analog and amplifier, we have quite a lot of noise, and we have this harmonic, which is quite high, minus 66. In the top end, it's not that bad, but the lower end suffers. Now with RCA's out, situation is obviously better, because if you're comparing amplifier with RCA's, it should be better. So it is. The noise is much lower. We have these still harmonics. They're still quite high, minus 73. It's not that bad, but ideally you would want that. But yeah, it's not that bad. And then we switch to USB. So USB, again, playing files from internal memory or whatever, lowers the noise even more. So analog, if you're using the auxiliary inputs, it does add some noise. However, you can see the harmonics difference. With USB, you have much more harmonics compared to analog. Analog has much noise, but USB has more harmonics. So it's not ideal, but this is with RCAs out. Now, when you switch to digital, you have this, and bam, literally zero harmonics. So all of these harmonics just disappear. And this is exactly as I mentioned, this is performance of the Scarlett Focusrite. Now I do realize that I have this quite high. I usually don't have it. I have it minus 140, usually something like that. So this is basically ideal performance over digital. So this is optical output and this is coax output. Coax is even better than optical. It has, for some reason, it has less noise and zero harmonics. And just because the DAC that is connected to this digital output doesn't have any harmonics, so is as good as it gets. Now with Bluetooth, we have some stuff, noise especially. Harmonics are not that bad, but with Bluetooth, it's weird that you have these literally weird peaks that are not harmonics of the fundamental frequencies, but it's just, I don't know, I want to say random peaks of frequencies. I don't know what it is, but they're quite low, like these ones, minus 73, all the rest is like minus 86. So it's not that bad. Over Bluetooth, it's good. I want to say it's good. Apart from the noise. The noise is a bit higher, but it's still minus 100 dB, so it's fine. Now let's have a look at the higher frequencies into modulation. I'm going to shift here, so woo. Analog, obviously, loads of harmonics, minus 60, that is audible. 1718K is not audible, but the harmonics at this frequency, at this level, are audible. So analog is quite bad. You can see with RCAs, it's even worse because these harmonics are even higher than that. So at high frequencies, it's not that nice. Now USB, bam, all the harmonics go lower, minus 64. They're not as low as you would want it, and there's quite a lot of them, but they're a bit lower playing from USB. And when you go digital, bam, everything disappears. You have only these, which is like minus 90, so clearly not audible. But with digital, everything disappears. Coax, same, less noise, and same very, very low harmonics. So the digital performance of this is very, very nice. Bluetooth, surprisingly, it's not as bad. Yes, it does have a lot of noise. However, you can see that this like peak minus 80 almost, and you don't have any massive harmonics such as with analogs. So see, analog has much higher harmonics and Bluetooth doesn't. The Bluetooth, this one plays all the way up to 20K, and probably this is just noise, but like this Bluetooth chip, even if the codec is the worst one, the SBC, it's good. The performance is very good. Now multi-tone, I could check it only on analog because playing it via file, it screws up with the windowing, so it just doesn't show correctly. But with analog, it's not that bad. Minus 74. You could have more, but it's not as bad. If we're gonna check here, it shows 12 bits. So for CD you want 16. Probably on digital it would be nicer, but I couldn't check it properly on digital. And now the last thing is the frequency response. So this is a very, very zoomed in scale. You can see 1 dB increments. And this is something similar to the one that we had with a total, but this is analog inputs with amplifier outputs. On RCAs, slightly worse. So you have a bigger roll off. Interestingly, that on amplifier you have more low end extension and with RCAs you have less. However, so you're dropping 1 dB down to 26 from like 500, and then this weird hump at the top end, and it falls off 15k, and then below it falls off. Granted, 1 dB up to like 18k, so it's not a problem because we hear up to like 16k, which is something here, and you have zero point 0.4 of a dB drop, so it's not that big of an issue. But this peak is just weird. I don't know, 0.7 of a dB peak between 7k and 15k. I've never seen that before. And a slight roll off. If we play from USB, we don't have this drop at the bottom end. And I did check it. There's no EQ, no nothing. Everything is flat in the actual head unit. So we have much nicer frequency response. Down to 20k, we're dropping on like 0.8 dB, which is fine. But the top end, again, is something not nice. Now when we go to digital outputs is this. So with digital, what we have is much nicer response at the bottom end. So at 20k we are down only 0.3 dB, which is literally nothing. However, at the top end, we do have that extension all the way up to 20k, but with this massive peak of, how much is it? Almost 1.5 dB at like 10k, which is very weird. I've never seen this before, and I don't know why it is. I did check all the settings and everything. There's nothing there, and this is present on all inputs. You can see analog, digital, USB, everything. Coax is exactly the same, so optical and coax measures identical, which is expected. And Bluetooth, we have this on the top end, but again with Bluetooth we have this little peak at 1k. And now I would need to do some further investigation, because I had exactly the same peak while measuring the Atoto head unit. So can it be the phone? I'm not sure, because I don't have anything like this while I was connected to my Helix DSP. So I don't know. It might be that both of these head units kind of boost this 1k region just to have some, like, I don't know, clarity in the voice or something. I have no idea. But yeah, if you're using digital outputs, it's clean, it's flat. However, we have this massive hump. Well, massive. If I'm going to zoom out to like typical 5 dB scale, it's not that big of an issue. You see just a little bump in there. It might help if you have like amplifiers that have rolling off the top end, or speakers that are quite off axis. It might help a bit. It's just like 1 dB plus. But yeah, something like this. So the results are kinda exactly what I expected. Built-in amplifier, exactly the same as we tested with Atoto. RCAs are much better than Atoto. We have much better than Atoto. Didn't have any RCAs. So yeah, if you're using high to low level converters, these RCAs are much better. And the fact that we have 5 volts clean is a very big plus. So this head unit can be used with normal amplifiers, no issues. If your amplifier needs like 4 volts, it's not going to be a problem at all. You can play with the levels not to go over those 4 volts in the settings. The reason why everybody's buying this head unit is the digital outputs, and this is exactly why I'm going to be putting this in my car, and I'm going to be using, because using digital, there's nothing. Everything is kind of perfect. Now, I didn't play with all like USB players and everything. That might be for the future, but even through the built-in music player app, whatever that is, playing simple tones generated with REW, we have this, which is THD plus noise, is the level of my audio interface that I am measuring. So this number, it's not the actual number of the head unit. This number is just a limitation of my analog to digital converter that I was using while I was taking the measurements. So if you're using digital outputs, hooray, Happy days. It cannot be any better than that. And in the next video, I'll be putting this in the car. I will be testing it actually daily, and we're going to tune the system with it. But for now, this is pretty much it. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one.